Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to talk about updating bindings succinctly. Especially when looping, a program often needs to update a binding to hold a value based on that binding's previous value. Counter is equal to counter plus 1. So previously we've seen that, actually I wonder what's going to happen when we run this. Yeah, nothing happens. So the right side of an expression is going to be evaluated first. So whatever value counter has is going to be added to 1, and then whatever this expression evaluates to is going to be assigned as the new value for counter. JavaScript provides a shorthand for this. So counter plus equals 1 is the same as counter equals counter plus 1. We just shorten it. Similar shortcuts work for many other operators, such as result times equals 2 to double result, or counter minus equals 1 to count downward or decrement. This allows us to shorten our counting example a little bit more. And let's check over in the notes about code that we have. Do we have a for loop? We do have this one. I want to put this one in there as well. This is a pretty consistent format. 2 spaces, cool. And I'm putting 2 spaces in between each code section. We could do that, or we could put comment lines or something. Nothing really super important about the difference between those. It ends up just being a readability issue. Okay, so let's run this code, see what happens. Same story. For counter plus equals 1 and counter minus equals 1, there are even shorter equivalents, counter plus plus and counter minus minus, which is cool because you can actually do plus plus counter and minus minus counter, and it's actually kind of wild. So what happens is, well, let's just go ahead and show. So in case you haven't noticed, you can get rid of all the code here and console.log, anything, well, anything valid. And when you run it, it'll just operate the way that it should. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things. We'll say let counter equal 5, and then we'll console.log counter plus plus, and then console.log counter. We're going to do a couple more. We're also going to console.log a counter here, and then we're going to set up some labels. Now the reason that I'm going into this in such depth is because managing your console.log statements early on is a very, very low cost way of looking at what's going on inside your program. So we'll say before increment, and we'll go after increment. So run. Before increment is 5. The expression counter plus plus is also 5. After the increment has taken place, which is to say this operation, counter is now equal to 6, which is what we would expect because it's the same as counter plus equals 1. But it isn't, right? So it's kind of wild. So counter plus equals 1 ends up giving us 6 because this expression itself is slightly different than this one, and it's different in this way. If we were to say counter equals counter plus 1, we're going to get that same value of 6 here because this is the value that ends up being logged to the console, and this is value 5, and we assign value 6 to this, so that's what gets logged to the console. If we do counter plus plus, it'll remain 5 because it's logging the counter before the incrementation actually happens. Now, why is this important? It really isn't. But it's one of those where it's kind of fun to know that you could also put plus plus before the counter, and it's going to have the same effect as writing the expression in the previous way. Now, you're going to come across things like this where if you're like me, you're like, oh, fun. If you don't like stuff like this, I'm sorry to have taken some time to go over it, but there's tons of things like this where it's like, hey, why is it like that? It's like, well, it just is. Now, of course, it isn't just that way. It was written at a certain point within an intention in mind. I don't know it, though, so as far as I'm concerned, it just is because it is. So with all of that, you're not going to need to remember anything about this. Much better idea to keep in mind the idea of plus equals and plus plus as shorthand ways to get around our for loop incrementation. And that's going to be it for this subsection. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.